Okay. Do you just want me to start whenever?
No, I'll wait until
Okay.
there's nothing in the waiting room, no one in the waiting room, and then I'll start. A minute. See, I think I've admitted everyone.
Yeah, the waiting room is clear so far.
Okay, well, I have a hunch there will be more people joining us, well, I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Chantel, would you mind admitting people as they show up?
Got it.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone to our first Growth Lunch and Learn of the semester. I apologize that we're not lunching, and unless we've brought our own lunches, you're welcome to eat while we're meeting. Of course, because of COVID, we're still on Zoom. We're going to have a heck of a reception when we can do it. That's all I can say. I'm very pleased today that we have Louisa Raisbek from our Department of Kinesiology presenting on her research. And I just want to mention that after she's presented, there will be time for questions and answers and discussion, and we should still have time after that to go around the room and introduce ourselves to each other. And if there are any requests for collaboration across growth, that would be a good time to mention that. Louisa, is there anything else other than the title of your presentation that you'd like me to share?
No, I guess I can't see the chat properly. I don't have my regular computer because I'm not in my office. So I can't see the chat. So if there's anything that comes up during it, will you just, I don't know, just stop me or something like that?
Okay, Chantel or I can intervene if that happens. So today, Louisa is going to talk about attentional focus and balance in older adults.
Hello.
And as someone who pays no attention and who has balance issues, I'm actually really looking forward to this presentation, not only for professional reasons, but personal reasons as well. So Louisa, I think you're sharing your screen. Does anyone else have any trouble hearing or seeing or anything like that? Okay, Louisa, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. So thank you for having me. This is actually exciting for me too. I'm gonna discuss some of my research today that I've done on older adults. And then a little bit before I do all that, I'm probably just gonna talk a little bit about how I landed in this area and then give you a little snippet about myself too. I'm getting some feedback here. Like I'm getting like an echo, Rebecca. What, should I try and turn off my video? I've never had that happen before. I'm still getting
we can't hear the echo on our side, Louisa, and I just muted everyone, so maybe that'll help.
Okay, let me, I'm getting like my own voice back. Hold on. Let me. Okay. No, I'm still getting it. Ah, sorry, technology. All right, let me try this. Can you guys still hear me okay if I do that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's just do that, then I'll turn it back on in a minute. All right, so I am originally from England, as you've probably already detected from my voice, my accent. I moved to the United States in 2001, and I was actually supposed to go to Florida State to study with a mentor. My mentor's name is Dr. John Shea, and a few weeks before I was set to leave, I got this call from him and he said, hey, I know that you're getting ready to leave, but I just accepted this position at Indiana University as chair of the department. And if you'd like to go there instead, then you can. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't really know anything about IU, but I was just like, I wanted to study with him. And I guess I was really only going to Florida because it's hot and sunny. And when you're from England, that's what you initially want. And so I was just like, yeah, I'll go live in Indiana. And I'm really glad I did because it was really fun. And I think I got a lot of good experience, especially studying with him. So I completed both my master's degree and PhD with him at IU. And at the time when I went there, I never went there with the intention of becoming a scholarly academic. I used to be a professional swimmer. And so I went there because I wanted to learn more about sports science, and I wanted to be a swim coach. And so during my time at IU, I coached the women's swim team. And, you know, anybody that knows anything about swimming, IU is a really great swim program. And so we got all of these championship awards and things like that. And I put myself in a really great position to become a swim coach. And I applied for coaching positions when I was coming up to the end of my PhD. And I got those jobs, but once I was finishing my PhD, something just made me say, maybe I should apply for these academic positions too. And so I went back to my advisor and I was just like, hey, do you think that I should apply for these other academic positions and not just go after swim coaching? And he was just like, yes, what took you so long? And so I applied for some PhD positions. I applied for some faculty positions. And I ended up with my first job all the way up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So that picture that you see on the screen there of that really pretty ice sculpture or snow sculpture, that's what they do up there. We get about 320 inches of snow, and it starts around October and it finishes snowing around the end of April. And right after Christmas break or winter vacation, they come back and they build these snow sculptures, and it's a big, huge competition. Most of the students that go there are in engineering of some type, and that's what they do. And it was really fun, and I loved it, but I can't say that I'm really sad to not be in the snow for that long during the year. Although it does make me kind of laugh a little bit when we get the snow that we have here, because, you know, then my kids are off school all week for just a couple of inches of snow, but I understand that they don't have the resources here to be able to deal with that. So the other picture that you see up on that screen of the two little girls, those are my daughters. The one with the really blonde hair, the tallest one, her name is Ren, and I had her about 6 weeks before I moved here. So it was a really big transition. There was a lot going on for me when I first came here. And then a couple of years later, I had Robin, and they are both, they're both in school, and they were both doing remote learning up until about 45 minutes before I got onto this call with you guys. And I apologize ahead of time if they interrupt us. Hopefully they won't. All right, so getting into my research then. My early research was focused on motor imagery. Again, just a little bit of background for that. Remember what I said, I was really interested in coaching and trying to improve performance. And I was coming from a motor behavior background and not physiology, even though I love physiology. But I was really interested in what could we do within the motor area that could improve my swimmers' performance, that can improve their learning, that could just make some slight changes. And motor imagery is pretty underutilized, although it's very heavily researched. People still don't use it the way that they should in different domains. And so that was one of the areas that I went into. And then an organic progression from there in my research led me to look at skill acquisition and practice. And I wanted to examine the effects of practice on performance and learning, which then led me into carving my own niche within the attentional focus literature. And I've published across lots of different disciplines within this literature, and some of them I have listed up there. So I started with shooting research. We looked at people in the police force, and we looked at people in the army. and we were looking at their shooting style, their skill, where their focus was, what their focus was on. And we looked at the differences between experts and novices. And so what we noticed with the experts is with an expert person that is shooting any type of firearm, they're going to be more focused on the effects that it's going to have on the environment, as opposed to somebody that's just learning it for the first time or that's pretty new to using firearms, and they focus on the internal aspects of their own actual movements. And so the performance for those that focus on the environmental aspects are much more proficient than those that focus on the internal aspects of their own body movements. And from there, I moved on to kinematics. Well, what does that mean? What do they need to change? We looked at just positions of like elbows, shoulders, fingers, things like that. And then we were also interested in that perceived workload. Like, what does that mean for somebody that is an expert? How do they perceive that to be? Is it stressful to them? Do they perceive that cognitive workload to be really demanding? And again, as you would expect, we noticed that with the novices, the workload is a lot higher. There's more stress involved with it, as opposed to somebody that has been doing it for a lot longer. And so from there, I went on to, well, how do we teach that? And how do we teach somebody to think about the environment without drawing attention to the actual body parts? And so I moved into looking at instructions and just changing slight words to encourage somebody to think more about the environment and take the focus completely away from their body, their bodily parts, their movements, and etc. Just, I want you to focus on that target over there, something like that. And then I got into thinking about, okay, what can I do with my research that makes it fundable, that starts to bring in more health aspects to it? And I had always been told that unless I was in physiology as a kinesiology person, then my research probably wasn't going to be fundable. And I was just like, okay, I mean, I was okay with that, you know, but then as you progress through your career, you're like, wait, is my research really not fundable? What do I need to do to make this something that is really interesting to those that are going to fund my research, that allows me to do bigger things with it? And so I started looking at health aspects, and I noticed that balance is a really big issue with older adults, especially as we pass the age of 65, it becomes an even more prominent issue. And I decided to pursue NIH funding. And I took the research that I have and I turned it into research in older adults that were at risk of falling. Okay. So I got together with some colleagues. I collaborate with a professor in kinesiology in our department. His name is Dr. Ray. Some of you are probably very familiar with him. And so we submitted a grant, and I didn't really think much of it when I submitted it. I wrote the grant, I did everything that I was supposed to do, and I submitted it. And then I just kind of put it to one side, and I was still doing all of my other things with my grad students. And then I get this email that's like, okay, well, you got scored. And I was just like, I got scored? How did I get scored? Like, you don't get scored. And so then I got really excited about it. So I took the reviews and then I made the modifications that they recommended. And then I submitted it again. And on that resubmission, it got funded. And so for the past 4 years, my research has been looking at older adults and risk of falls. So why is that interesting? Well, I'm interested in it because, again, older adults need to reduce that fall risk. Okay, we want to help them maintain what we call functional independence. And so functional independence is being able to continue to do all of the things that they do on a daily basis, the best that they can do, without having a lot of fear behind engaging in those things. So we know that approximately 15 million older adults are going to experience some type of fall. out of that 15 million, 30% of those falls typically result in some form of injury that becomes debilitating to the individual. So when that happens, we then understand that falls reduce functional independence, and that's what we want to maintain. So when you see a reduction in functional independence, then you see a higher increase in morbidity. So with functional independence, why does that matter? Why does that matter to my research? Why was that something that was really interesting to me, and why I honed in on that? So functional independence is going to be affected by physical activity levels. Physical activity levels are important because that's what helps people maintain their independence from having to rely on other people, from having to rely on doctors, nurses, physical therapists, etc. Okay. When you have good functional independence, then your fear of falling is going to be much lower than if you are if you become dependent on somebody else. So that loss of independence is going to increase their fear of falling. It's going to increase their fear of being able to just move around. It's going to take away their ability to do their daily activities. So they start to self-impose these limitations on themselves to the daily activities. And once that starts, then you just see this, like a domino effect. So the overall goal with the balance interventions that I'm interested in is that we want those older adults to remain physically active, not only for the physical benefits and the cognitive benefits, but so that they feel like they can continue to do things without the worry of falling over. So I just want you to think about yourselves for a second, like with all of this ice that we've had. When we go out and we walk out in the environment, we automatically start to internalize what we are doing. We immediately start to think about our feet and how far apart our feet are, and we probably will shuffle along in the snow a little bit. And so all of our focus becomes about what we are doing internally, okay? And I'm not saying that you should necessarily change that, especially when it comes to ice, because I don't want everybody to go out there and start falling over. But if you put some of that focus onto the environment and you start to notice the environment around you, you can probably make changes in your movement that allows you to interact with that environment differently than what you would if you were just solely focused on yourself. And so when people do that, when they focus more on the environment and where they are placing their foot, rather than, oh, my foot needs to just take a tiny small movement, instead of my foot needs to get to that place right there in front of me, you choose targets and things that you can achieve. When we start to focus internally, then we take away some of that independence already, because you've already instilled this fear inside of you about how you perceive something might be. Okay, and then the automatic cognitive workload of that becomes that it's more difficult for you to walk on the ice. It's more difficult for you to walk in the snow. It's more difficult for you to get to your car and get out and drive around. It's becoming like there's a lot more resistance rather than assistance in being able to do things. So remember when I mentioned the workload on the previous slide, if they remain physically active, then what you find in the literature is that their overall perceived workload, what they perceive to be more difficult, becomes lower than if they are not active. So all of those things, they have that domino type effect. And that's why I became really interested in what the impact was on the loss of independence and how that was going to facilitate my research working with older adults. So we know that there are financial resources, and we know that when somebody with falls in general, the healthcare system is taking on 6 to 8 billion annually. And so that's a huge financial burden to the healthcare system. So just based on those statistics alone, I kind of took them and I ran with them and said, hey, we already have these balance interventions in place. They don't necessarily work too well. And I think I have a reason why. And so I said that I wanted to explore these methods to improve balance and reduce fall risk in older adults. So although there are those balance interventions that are already in place, and some of you are probably aware of them already, we have things in the YMCAs like the Silver Sneakers. I know church groups do different balancing programs. We have all the different types of martial arts that, especially with Tai Chi, that a lot of older adults engage in. We have yoga, all of those balance interventions are there in place. But for some reason, we don't typically transpire until after a fall has occurred. And so at that point, the financial burden has already started. So with most of these balance interventions that are only moderately effective at best, we were like, okay, what do we need to do? Like, the balance interventions are starting too late. What do we need to do to get into these programs where people can engage with them before that happens, before the burden is started, before the fear of the fall is already there? So I understood that falls were a public health concern. I became aware that the current balance intervention programs were only moderately successful. And I thought, well, you know what? I can take my attentional focus background and try to turn that into a grant that people are going to be really interested in. And I tried to spin a different type of approach. And so I have a unique approach to it where it doesn't really require retooling of all clinical practice. It just requires some type of modification in the current delivery of that balance intervention that's already out there. And so all I'm saying to practitioners and to the individuals is, hey, just listen to the change in the words, okay? If we can change the delivery and get you to understand the instructions using different verbal instructions, then that's going to eventually have this cost-benefit ratio approach that's going to become really appealing to the health administration, to clinical practitioners, to administrators, and then more importantly, to the individuals that we are working with. So those previous balance interventions that I talk about, they're usually more biomechanically driven, okay? And when they're biomechanically driven, it's not really something that somebody else can understand. The layperson can understand. So our physical therapists can understand it, the coaches can understand it, but the individuals that are engaging with it, they don't really understand that to a degree, okay? And most of those balance interventions, they have specific requirements related to an aspect of movement, and they are always, always, always internally focused. We are always directing attention to the body. When we are coaching, we are always directing attention to what you can do with the body to make the change, rather than directing the attention to the external aspects of how are you going to interact with the environment. So the literature is pretty conclusive that using something called an internally focused driven set of instructions is not usually favorable when we are rehearsing or learning motor patterns for optimal performance and learning. So an alternative approach would be to use attentional focus. So attentional focus, like I've already mentioned, can be differentiated into what I term internal focus and what I term external focus. So for internal focus, we are directing learners' attention to body parts or body movements. For external focus, we are directing attention to the effects of their movement on the environment. Okay, so this is research that it's not new. It's relatively well researched now. It's just never really been put into a practical world before. And that's what I decided to do. That's where my research comes in. So the external focus has been shown to result in having a much more superior skill learning for retention too. So retention is just anything that we can maintain once an intervention or once a practice session is ended, okay? And then it has that additional benefit to balance and fall prevention programs, because we see when we engage with the external focus instructions that we trend in a pattern where we can see changes in their performance, in the way that they think about things. This grant looked at so many different variables, and I'm just going to go over 2 of them with you guys today. So the purpose of the study was one of the purposes was to evaluate changes in fear of falling, okay? And we took something called the Short Activity Specific Balance Confidence Scale, and we just asked those questions. We would ask those questions after they completed a practice session, and we asked them at the end of the 12 weeks of the actual intervention. And so the 12 weeks of the intervention, the hypothesis that we had was that participants who received external focus instructions would report increases in confidence on this scale compared to those that received internal focus instructions. All right, so we recruited adults 65 to 90 years of old who reported falling during a 12-month period. And we recruited them to participate in this, it's a clinical trial. So they were randomized into 2 different groups. The balance training intervention was 12 weeks of training on the balance boards in the picture that you can see. The training occurred twice a week for 20 minutes, and it was 20 continuous rounds of 30 seconds of balance and 30 seconds of rest. So it wasn't a long period of time. We were asking them to do this for a long time, which was challenging to get participants to engage in something for this long, which is a whole nother story. But we weren't really asking them to participate in the sessions for a long time. So it wasn't that physically tasking, and it wasn't really that cognitively tasking. So the external focus group, and this is where I want you to look at the difference in the instructions. The external focus group was told to focus on keeping that board that you see parallel to the floor. They could do anything they wanted to keep it parallel to the floor. They were obviously going to have to manipulate what they were doing with the feet and the legs. Okay, but we weren't giving them, for the external focus group, instructions on what to do with any parts of their body. Just keep that board parallel to the floor. The internal focus group was instructed to focus on keeping the feet parallel to the floor. So there's just one change in those instructional cues, but it makes a difference. Okay. All right, so at baseline, it was week 0 and post-intervention was week 12. The testing was the ABC6 and it was used to test for their balance confidence and their fear of falling. I don't know if I said that, but the F0F, that's fear of falling. For the 6 different activities that you can see on that scale there. We just had participants indicate their level of self-confidence by choosing a corresponding number from the scale, and then a global score was determined. And then if you look at this graph up here, you can see that the percent confidence for the external focus group was trending as less confident in the beginning, and the internal was more confident, which makes sense, right? It makes sense based on what I just discussed. And if you think about all of the things that you do, or the things that you've always been told by people as well, even from just being a young age, when you're moving through like learning different tasks, different motor tasks, sports activities, you're always told something that's very internally focused, okay? Then if you look at week 12, the external and internal focus groups, they become much closer together in the overall balance confidence. And a side note, this data goes in much further past the 12 weeks, and this is just how long the training intervention was. And we gave them what is called a retention break, and then we collected more of this data, balance specific data at 13, 16, and 20 weeks. We just wrapped up our data collection, and so that analysis is ongoing. So you're getting a small snippet of what we have going on here. So just to end on that note, before I get into the next one that I want to introduce to you, we saw that there was an increase in balance confidence for external focus relative to that internal focus. Previous evidence was suggesting that exercise interventions that include balance training were associated with small to moderate reductions in fear of falling amongst community dwelling adults. And so we think that the reduction that we noticed in the fear of falling observed in the external focus group is pretty consistent with those findings. And obviously we are analyzing our data further down the line. Okay, so our second purpose was to evaluate changes in postural sway, the total center of pressure, the anterior posterior, the medial lateral on a force plate following 12 weeks of attentionally focused dynamic balance training. So it's not static because we're having them move around. So the participants who received the external focus instructions, we hope would exhibit less postural sway compared to those who received the internal focus instructions. So the methods that we did were exactly the same. So this is just another variable that we're pulling up. But at the end of the 12 weeks, we put them on this force plate, and they did 3 20-second trials. Participants stood on that force plate with the hands on the hips, the eyes were closed, just like you can see on that figure there in front of you. All right. And so the results show that the total center of pressure and medial lateral and anterior posterior distance and baseline and at week 12. So start to finish for the actual intervention. The trend that you can see shows that external focus is decreasing as the internal focus is roughly remaining the same or sometimes increasing. So again, we have that further analysis is ongoing into a retention period, and we collected data again at 13 weeks, at 16 weeks and 20 weeks, but we just wrapped everything up, and so we're just finalizing and pulling all of our data together now. So what does that mean then? So we think, based off of those two variables, that there's a positive effect of that dynamic balance training with an external focus relative to an internal focus, that it suggests that the external focus will be advantageous during training strategies for reducing postural sway in older adults, which is what we want. We want to see a change in the overall postural sway that allows them to remain that functional independence, that allows them to think about things differently, that slows down their fear of falling when they are doing an activity, when they are doing something that is out of the norm for them, when they are just moving around their daily life, like just going out for a walk. I just had my mom over from England, and we were just walking right before she left to fly back to England, actually. And she just took one little stumble and I was able to catch her, but I was just thinking, wow, like there was nothing really there. It was just the way that her foot planted on the ground and she just started to fall. And so it's just little things like that. If we can get people in to some of these training interventions, or if we can have other practitioners implement it into the training interventions that they're already doing, so into yoga for older adults, into some of the Tai Chi, into some of the silver sneakers, and just get them thinking about how they are interacting with the environment, then that might change the way that they perceive balance to be, perceive their own balance, and just change the way that their postural sway is overall. So again, although this research exists, that application into applied environments is really lacking. And I get it. With research, it's like you read the research, we're reading it all of the time. But is it getting to the right people? And how do we get it into the right hands so that we can see some of these changes being made? And so that's actually the next step of where I want to go with this, is to try and get some groups of physical therapists and try to get an intervention that they are running instead of I'm running, and just see what some of these changes are. So if we can get some of these physical therapists to drive their practice using an external focus of attention over the internal focus that they're already using, then hopefully we'll start to see that reduction in fall risk and that reduction in what they perceive to be as that overall fear of falling. All right, that's all I have, and I'm open to lots of questions. I'll turn my video back on and see if I'm still getting that feedback.
Thank you, Louisa. I just wanted to make a couple comments and then open it for questions before we kind of have a little mini meeting at the end. I just coincidentally, I learned to shoot in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan on my grandparents' farm. So I found your introduction kind of interesting. And I wanted to mention a potential person for you to collaborate with. There's a man in Asheville who runs something called the Gun and Yoga Society. I think he's going to find this presentation interesting.
Oh, cool.
No, and as I expected, this was of great personal interest to me. I now know that I have postural sway, which I didn't have a word for it before. Maybe when COVID's over, I'll volunteer for one of your experiments. Do other people have questions or comments? You can just, oh, I see Elise has her hand up. Go right ahead, Elise.
Hey, Elise.
Hi, Louisa. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing really well. Thank you for a great presentation. This is really interesting research. I'm wondering if we could have a discussion about kind of real world application, right? Like how can people right now kind of utilize this research with the older adults in their life? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Do you mean like physical therapists, or do you mean?
Sure. So, like, how do you utilize your research with your mom? Like when she had that fall, like what did you tell her like she needs to do or think about so that doesn't happen again?
So actually, that is really interesting. So after I caught her and made sure she was okay, I was just like, Mom, like, what are you thinking about when you're walking? Because when she was here this time, and bearing in mind, I hadn't seen her in 2 years because of COVID. And she walks a lot, like she probably walks up to 10 miles a day. And so I said to her, what are you thinking about when you're walking? And I asked her that really because I had noticed when she walks, I can hear her feet kind of scuffing as though it's like when I say to my kids, pick up your feet. I wanted to say that to my mom, but couldn't because she's my mom. But, you know, after that happened, I was just like, Mom, what are you thinking about when you're walking? And she's just like, I'm thinking about putting my heels down first. And I was just like, well, why are you thinking about putting your heels down first instead of just walking and not thinking about it? And she said, I don't want to have a fall. And I never heard her say anything like that before. I mean, I don't really consider my mom to be old. She's in her mid to late 60s. And I guess I was just kind of like, if my mom, who is really super active, is already starting to think in her head, oh, I'm going to fall, but she's already adjusted the way that she's walking, like, then yeah, there's something that needs to be done. And I mean, I've just really started to think about that as we've wrapped up this research of where do we go with this now? Because, you know, I don't just want it to be the people that I go to conferences with saying, oh, this is really great. And then end there, like we need to get it out there into the applied settings. And so the next grant that we were writing actually touches on that of we want to bring in some physical therapists and we want to introduce this to a program that we are not running, that we teach them how to run and then see, you know, like what happens with that. And so what I ended up saying to my mom was, instead of thinking about your foot placement, just think about the path ahead of you. Like look at what's ahead of you and just keep walking towards that, because then she's focusing on the environment and she's interacting with it. So instead of just, you know, paying attention, I don't know, to this heel toe that she'd started paying attention to, and then just talking to me, she's now looking ahead and being like, oh, there might be something up there that I need to avoid. And then she can modify her step that way, rather than shuffling along like she'd started to do and making these much smaller movements, which we know that once we start to bring our stance in, and once we start to, Kathleen is like, your mom is much younger than me. Kathleen. once we start to bring our stance in and once we start to change that, then we are more likely to end up with a fall based on the literature that I have already read. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very curious to know what people should be thinking about based on this research. So yeah, that was great. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I guess I might just ask if you can hear me.
Yes.
He talked about, I guess the people, if I understand correctly, the people that you worked with had previously had falls, right? And sort of where, like looking toward the future, like what age range or where should we be targeting preventatively to get ahead of this rather than be so reactionary to it?
Oh my gosh, lifelong, right? I mean, like I'm a multi-behavior person, but I'm a big person that believes in like all of the physiology behind it. And so a question like that, I guess I would answer it's a lifelong thing that we should be introducing at a young age and keeping people physically active and not letting them get into these lulls that we all admittedly get into. And so I guess that's my answer for that. I think that I probably want to go at it before the age of 65. I think as researchers, we choose the age of 65 because we know we're going to see differences. But ideally, we would want to do it much like earlier, probably starting in the mid to late 40s, and then starting to compare that way, which maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll have some grad students that start to collect on some of the older ones. But when we do look at that age groups, though, we don't really see much change in their postural sway or in their movements. And so I guess it does become difficult when you are trying to do research that you are trying to publish with these significant results, but knowing that it's, you know how it is.
Joseph?
Excuse me. So I'm a physical therapist that has been working on fall risk mitigation and fall prevention for
Hi.
decades. And with classes and working with individuals, I'd love to learn how, this seems like a very unique approach. I haven't heard of this approach before, this intentional approach with external focus. I'd love to learn more on how I can incorporate some of these approaches in my classes and in my treatment as well. So can you share with us your email address or contact information?
Louisa, I can put it in the chat if you want.
Okay, that'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right,
Yeah, thank you.
I just want to mention, particularly since you're in the field, that we will be posting this on the Growth YouTube channel, which you should all subscribe to, but I'll upload this presentation sometime within the next day or two. Elise, you have your hand up again.
Shameless plug, my classes are also featured on YouTube.
Oh, cool.
This is a little bit of a follow-up question. And you may or may not be able to answer it, but you said you're writing a grant. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're thinking, what this intervention for physical therapists may look like?
So really, I think that it would just be taking what we have already done, because that's what we have the results on, and using them as a cohort and having them run the study for us. But we would have to train, sorry, we would have to train them first. So I guess we would probably have to go in and just teach them the instructions that we would want them to use and get them used to the fact that it's really, it's really difficult to, when you are used to getting an immediate result that you can observe a change in, you want to see that immediate performance, right? So if you go back and look at other motor learning literature, a lot of the literature is all about, we want this immediate performance. We want to see this immediate result because then that's what motivates people to keep going. But what we really know is if we change something about how we practice, that's different to what we have been taught. So I'm going to go into something completely off, but it's going to relate back. So with practice schedules, you can have something called a blocked practice, and you can have something called a random practice. And so blocked practice is repetitive. You do the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And then you get this, at the end of that practice session, you get this wonderful performance that everybody can do. But then they come back to it the next day or a week later or a month later, and they've forgotten everything you learned. Because it's just like when students are learning, if they learn for the test the night before and they memorize everything, great, they'll do a wonderful test, or some of them will have a wonderful test. But then you ask them the questions like a week later and they have no idea what the answers are. So if we randomize that practice, and we have them, instead of doing one thing repetitively over and over and over, and we randomize it into several different tasks that they are working through, you might not see the performance at the end of that practice session, but you will definitely see the performance will be better at the end of like 12 weeks or something, or you have them come back in and do a retention test like a day or so later. You see that the people that practiced randomly all of these different tasks rather than just one task perfectly are going to be better than the people that were in this blocked practice group. And so it's the same with internal and external focus. And so the concepts are the same, we're just using different terminology. And so with the internal and external focus, it's just a matter of getting people to change the way that they deliver their instructions, that they're not focused on the body, that they're not going to see that performance change at the end of that one session, but they are going to see it at the end of their intervention or at the end of their physical therapy sessions that they have or something like that. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think fall prevention research is always interesting, and it, you know, all public health research really is, because it's like, how do you know you prevented something from happening if it doesn't happen?
I know.
It's tricky.
So are there other questions or comments? Krista?
I guess I have another one. What might be some sort of, if people don't have a balanced sport or aren't involved in those sorts of things, are there kind of real world activities that can help with improving balance, or kind of, you know, where you would be engaged with the environment such that that would help with balance?
Yeah, and you know, I bet the physical therapists on this call could probably speak to some of those too, but some of the ones that I know is simply like, especially for older adults, that you might want to give them some exercises to do in the safety of their own home, and you want them to remain safe. You could have them do some single leg activities, but still maybe touching a chair in front of them, so they're staying close to something, they have something to grab onto, but they're still engaging in some of the balance activities. And I know a lot of people don't have those wobble boards, but you can also get these foam pads where it just changes the way that something feels underneath their feet. And those are relatively inexpensive. And so I think there's a lot of exercises like that. The ones that we do are going to be the single leg ones, standing on one leg, standing with it's called a Romberg stance, where you place one foot behind the other and one foot in front, and the heel and toes are touching, and just get them to stand like that and things like that.
No, I want to interject that, correct me if I'm wrong, Elise, but I believe when Elise was a graduate student at UNCG before she became a member of the faculty, was involved in a project that made these little placemats with exercises on them. And there were a lot of one leg balancing exercises on those placemats. I used them with my mother, and I sent a bunch to Israel and sent them all over the world when that project ended. So maybe, you know, something like that could, you know, be specifically designed to be available to older adults to use in their homes. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, Krista?
Or I have one more, and this is, probably intersecting several different things and not necessarily your field so much, but it makes me really think about kind of how we position movement and exercise as a culture, because we have such a focus on maintaining the body for a bikini or looking good with, you know, a tank top on or whatever. And how do we, and I don't know that we're going to answer this question today, but how do we as a society start looking at movement as a thing to maintain functional independence rather than to look cute while you're young or in your youth, so to speak? And I don't know, it's just a thought more than a thing that we can answer for sure.
So I guess I've not thought about it from that approach before, but in my class, in my undergraduate class, I do talk to them a lot about functional independence and how it's not necessarily something that they think about now, but in years to come, they're going to start thinking about it a lot more, and just trying to get them into that idea. And I have them, you know, go out of the classroom and just walk around campus, and I have them observe other people's movements. And the feedback that I have gotten from the undergrads is that taking my motor learning classes definitely got them to understand their body more and how it interacts with the environment, and then also how they're learning, how they were learning previously to that, like how they were trying to study for tests. All of the things like that changed. So I thought that was really interesting. It's getting to some people, and I think if the resources are there and we can educate them, then I think it does help. But yeah, I don't know about the other thing that you mentioned.
There's definitely a whole
Alexis?
genre of functional fitness and kind of using that as a framework. The placemats that Rebecca was mentioning was based on that, the functional fitness framework. So not about looks, but on that functional independence.
Alexi, did you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment. My background is in gerontology, but when I make this point, it comes from a caregiver perspective for my mom, who has normal pressure hydrocephalus and has a shunt, which is my understanding is a balance and gait disorder. And when I sit and listen to your comment about like what's practical and functional, one of the things we ran into with my mom is she didn't have a full length mirror in her house. And so when we would talk about her gait and talk about her balance, if somebody didn't assess it for her and record it and have her understand like how she stood up, what her posture looked like when she stood up, she only saw from the countertop up in her bathroom.
Right.
And so when you talk about just the practicality of it, I think, you know, I wonder if it would help for some people to have a full length mirror, nothing fancy, but if you don't see how you stand up, if you don't watch what you're doing from your waist down, then I wonder if you're only learning that in a gym setting, or you're only seeing that perhaps in an assessment, then it's hard to implement some of the things that you've talked about. So I just wanted to mention that. That was brought up to our attention when we were trying to figure out what was going on with her. She would always fall backwards. And it was, a lot of it had to do with, she couldn't see from her stomach down when she was walking in her own home. And so, you know, maybe just something as practical as a full length mirror to help people could be a suggestion for what you're trying to encourage them to, I guess, maybe to become stronger, to be more aware of their body, to have an understanding of what's going on. Just a thought.
That's really interesting. I think there's a lot of things like that, you know, we probably don't think about some of those things until people bring it to our attention too. So yeah, thank you.
Beth?
Hi, I'm a retired nursing faculty, so I'm glad to continue to be included in this. But I had one thing I wanted to mention is what nurses see a lot of is dog-related or pet-related falls. So an external focus seems to me would help with that. So that was one thing. The other is I have a lot of back problems and leg pain. So I have big balance issues, and I do fall. And so this has been really interesting to think about, because I walk a few miles a day, and I find myself thinking, okay, heel toe, to be careful so that I don't trip.
Yeah.
So it was interesting to hear you talk about that. The other thing I wanted to bring up was water aerobics. I didn't hear anybody talking about water aerobics, but exercises in water aerobics, because I go there and we do a lot of balance exercises, which are so much easier and build such self-confidence in the water, because you can do the things in the water.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
It's great to see you back, Beth.
You too.
Beth was a supporter of the gerontology program forever. So
Yeah, it's 27 years at UNCG.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the place now.
So I think it might be a good time to just go around the room and introduce ourselves, because there are some new people here and some people I haven't seen in a while. I'm Rebecca Adams. I coordinate growth, and I'm also still on the gerontology faculty full-time. The only thing I have to say is that if you received information about this meeting from some other way than a direct email to you, please do email growth@uncg.edu, and I'll make sure you get on the distribution list so that you'll hear about our next event, which is just in a couple of weeks. We're going to have Dana Turan, who was on this call earlier but had to get off, and she's going to talk about her work on cognitive aging. She just had a book come out. But let's just go around the room, and I know we are all in different orders on different screens, so I'll just call on people in the order you're on my screen. Chantel, do you want to explain yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chantel Caro. I am gerontology faculty. I'm faculty in the gerontology program. I teach the master's PBC students. I'm also on the executive board for growth. And then two last things. As part of my role in the gerontology program, I am the instructor for our capstone course. So for those of you who are Louisa too, but our community partners, we have a new group of capstone students coming up this summer. And if you are interested in some abled, skilled, intelligent students to come work with you for 6 weeks over the summer, I'm sure that we always have some that don't know where they're going. So I'm going to put our new website for all of our capstone information and a little, it's a really quick 5-question Google form where you fill out your information, probably not even 5 questions. I'm going to put that link in the chat so if you are interested, and I will also throw in my email. And last thing is, Beth, you mentioned water aerobics. I did water aerobics for a little while. I was the youngest person in the class. Everyone seemed to think that was odd. However, I was also the most challenged in the class. Like everyone was just going at it, and I'm sitting there weeble wobbling, like I don't know how to hold my head up in water. So it was a great experience, but it was way more difficult than I expected. Do we want to hot potato this, or do you want to call on people, Rebecca?
I think I'll call on them. So it gets so confusing when people move around. But at least you want to go ahead.
Everyone, my name is Elise Eifert, and I'm an assistant professor and graduate coordinator for the gerontology program. I recognize a few students and a few alumni on here, so I'm really excited. This was a great turnout, and Louisa, of course, we're Hoosiers together. So I don't know if you saw that in the chat, I put go Hoosiers. If people don't know, Louisa and I actually have a lot of mutual friends from our Indiana days. So it's a small world that we both ended up here at UNCG. But this was just a really great presentation. So I'm glad everybody could join.
Evan?
Hey there, my name is Evan Hatch, and Dr. Adams was kind enough to allow me to sit in on this forum. So I appreciate the talk today. My mother has recently had a fall, and I found this information to be fascinating. And I think I'm going to be able to talk with her about it. I am the founder of Narrate, and I am not part of this community, but look forward to meeting the rest of you. Narrate is an oral history service provider. I'm based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I am looking, I believe that Narrate would be a valuable service for older adults in the process of life review. So I'll reach out to you folks offline, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to spend some time with you today. Y'all have a good day. Thank you.
And Evan, you should just consider yourself a part of the hub. Once you're here, you're in. Krista?
All right. Hi, I'm Krista Westervelt. I am a senior finishing up my undergrad. I'm a minor in gerontology and I'm majoring in peace and conflict studies. Professionally, this past October, I finished up a stint as the Development and Communications Director at the Chatham County Council on Aging, and now I'm currently working as the Healthy Aging Initiative Coordinator at Partners in Health and Wholeness with the North Carolina Council of Churches. So that's me.
And Krista is an award-winning undergraduate. She wiped out all of the contests last year, the Library Award, Creativity Expo, second place in her category. So we're very proud of Krista applying to Divinity School. Okay, Matthew.
Hello, everyone. Matt Johnston. I work for Choice Care Navigators as the administrative director, but also a care manager. I'm also a recent graduate of the Gerontology Master's Program at UNCG. And actually, I found out about this position of this organization through my capstone program. So Dr. Carroll, I will speak with Dr. Allman about the possibility of us having an intern this summer. It's something we've discussed a little bit, but I'll dig a little bit deeper to see if that's something we could utilize.
Right, and if community partners or alums or anyone has any need for collaboration with faculty or students, we'd also like you to mention that. It's a two-way street. Lexi?
Sorry, I'm Alexis Williams. I'm the executive director of Caregiver Connect, and Caregiver Connect is a small nonprofit here in Greensboro that was founded by Mount Zion Baptist Church in 2014 to assist family caregivers. And I learned about the meeting today from Bob Kane, and I think Matthew and I were together when he mentioned it as well. So I always call Bob Kane the Pied Piper of geriatrics. So he was Pied piping and I was listening. Thank goodness. I am going to definitely reach out and see about becoming a community partner with you all for something for the summer. Currently, we do 3 things. We do educational opportunities throughout the year. Second is we host 3 caregiver encounter groups every month. And then the third thing that we do is I help families kind of navigate and figure out what resources are available in the community. So we're not, I stress, we are not care managers. We are more information and referral and kind of helping support the caregiver in their duties to try to figure out what might be in place for them to continue to do what they're doing. So I'm appreciative of the opportunity today to be here, and the topic really hits home. Like I said about my mom, she's in assisted living, and we have become all too familiar with gait and balance disorders. So thank you for your research.
Thank you, Alexis. And please do email growth at UNCG so I can make sure you don't have to rely on Bob, who always has information, but might forget to pass it along at some point. Also, Odell Cleveland, you mentioned Mount Zion has attended these too.
Good. So, well, I mean, in my mind, he's my boss, but he's my boss's boss. I have a board that I answer to, and he more or less oversees our board. So thank goodness for Reverend Cleveland.
Right. And for the rest of you who don't know, he has a great book on caregiving for his mother. I think it's called It's My Turn Now or something like that. Beth, do you have anything you want to add to your very brief introduction?
Well, I retired from the School of Nursing 6 years now, almost 7 years. And my research at that time was focused on teaching gerontology to healthcare providers. Taught a lot of CNAs and activity folks, and worked with Sue Fitzsimmons on my grant for that, and also focused on Alzheimer's. And I am on the curriculum committee for Life at Elon, which is a educational group sponsored by Elon University for about 500 people over 55 who attend classes in this program. So if anybody's looking for a research subject, please feel free to contact me and send me your flyers, and I can post them or have them sent out to that group.
Thank you, Beth. I think that's the group I presented to once, isn't it? Yes.
Dana Turon presented, yes, several people presented. They're a pretty well-educated, well-traveled, interesting group. But yeah, there's 500 people enrolled in lifelong learning.
Hey, Kathy Williams. There.
Hey,
Kathy.
hi Beth, it's good to see you. Kathy Williams, I am a recently retired faculty member in the Department of Kines. And I hadn't had the opportunity to come down to my basement and sit in front of my computer for a couple months. So I thought, what a good opportunity then to just come and listen to Louisa. So thanks.
Yes, and I should mention Kathy is a former director of the gerontology program. It's been passed around a lot over time, and she was the last one before Jan Wassel and the master's program and everything. Ed, are you there behind the black screen?
Yes, excuse me. I don't know if my picture, yeah, there's a picture of me. And I'm an example of once you're on the list, you're always on the list. I think I was invited 2 or 3 years ago to one of these sessions because of a role I had with, I think, the public library back then. But I'm just a local guy, an essentially retired lawyer. Actually, this subject matter is potentially a laboratory animal. I am that which you study. And so I'm interested in a lot of things about the fact that there is a group like this and what you all do, and then how to keep from falling down. All these things are something I like to hear about when I can.
Okay, Linda. Thank you, Ed.
Hi, everybody. I'm Linda Garbosi, and I am hopefully graduating from the Masters of Gerontology program later this year. Yes, Dr. Caro, I do owe you something today. And I have been trying to make these sessions over the last year, and it just never worked out. So I'm really thrilled to be here today and to hear about the research. My mom had a fall a couple of years ago, and I was just amazed at how much research the people in the hospital had done, but there's so much more that is really, really important. So thank you for that. I currently work as the program coordinator for Elder Care Choices of Senior Services in Forsyth County. And it's really a benefits package for employers so that anybody, any employee can call and say, you know, my mom is starting to need some help. Where do I go? How do I navigate that? And what's really cool is it's not just local. I work with people in, you know, I call somebody in Idaho and I say, hey, I've got somebody here. We need to find some resources. So it's a fun game to play. So again, thank you all. It's been great to be here today.
Thank you, Linda. It's nice to see your face. I see your name, but I had never seen your face. Jessie, I think you might be the last one.
Hi, I'm Jessie Granger, and I'm also a master's level gerontology student. hoping to graduate in December of this year. And currently, professionally, I work at a council on aging in Union County, North Carolina. I have also utilized this opportunity to be able to learn more about things that are offered to me here at UNCG, as well as meet other people that are in the possible field that I'll be in. And this is incredibly interesting because we also have a program through our local area agency on aging called A Matter of Balance that I had put in the chat that is similar to what you're talking about how to prevent the fear of falling. And okay, you're falling, what do you do to help reduce injury? And it's peer taught, and it's just an amazing program that I think would be an awesome, opportunity to incorporate research with that. So yeah, but that's me.
Thank you, Jessie. Is that everybody? I think that was everybody. I just have a couple more comments and I'll let you go unless there's more questions, but I do want to remind you again, growth@uncg.edu. We have the Growth YouTube channel. There's the UNCG Gerontology Facebook page. If you search on that and send a request, I'll make sure it's approved. Chantel sends out Instagrams from gerontology. So if you're an Instagram person, let us know and we'll hook you up with that. And Elise moderates a LinkedIn page. We all kind of just organically took social media responsibilities. So there's lots of ways you can connect with us. Feel free to share the invitation you received. There's a place down at the bottom with a sign-up form that will automatically add people to the list because we do want to grow this hub beyond the confines of Greensboro. Now that we know that we may need community partners all over the place as we progress. I had just one thought that kept going through my head, and I apologize because this is so silly. But throughout Louisa's presentation, I was thinking about a Frank Zappa lyric from the Mothers of Invention. Let's stand her on her head. She's no fun. She falls right over. And it was one of my favorite lyrics while I was young, and I think it might have something to do with my future as I grow older. But in any case, this was wonderful. I will post this on YouTube. So if there are people you think would enjoy hearing this presentation who weren't able to come today, it will be there. And Louisa, I'm going to follow up with you. I'd love to get some assessments I could share with my undergraduates to do on themselves. It's a way to get them to think about declining functionality to see
that'd be
where
great.
they're at now. Yep. Thank you very much. And you'll be getting an invitation to Dana Turan's presentation on February 2nd. So I hope to see you all again there. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.